truly one of the busiest guys working in any industry anywhere here. I mean, of the things that we have it listed on the rundown here, broadcasting Rangers and Knicks games in New York, Olympic hockey for the NBC networks, college hoops for ESPN+, NFL and MLB for Fox Sports, and probably about 5 things that I'm forgetting. But we'll talk about all of these things here with the one and only Kenny Albert, who we are pleased and honored to have back in the FDH Lounge. Good to have you back on, sir. How are you tonight?
Good to be with you guys once again. Thanks for having me on, and I think you pretty much captured it with the intro.
Okay.
It's been a pretty busy time, and now things get a little lighter over the next couple of months, but thanks for having me on again.
Hey, we're so happy to do that, and the first thing I got to ask you about, it's always funny when we've had this booking in the works for a while, but something kind of always happens, and immediately off the bat there becomes a timely thing to ask you about. You happen to be in the booth, of course, on Saturday for the marathon game with the Mets and the Cardinals, and it's funny. I saw the thing in the New York Daily News today here because you apparently made a point of noting that you stayed in the booth the whole time here, and the Daily News made a crack about how you probably cost yourself a lucrative Flomax contract by doing that.
That is true. I was in the booth for the entire 20 innings, the 6-hour, 53-minute game. Never made a run for the men's room. Never really felt the need to. Didn't really drink that much during the game. It's a little different during a baseball game, especially on television, as opposed to a hockey game on radio or a basketball game on radio where you're really straining your voice for 3 hours. Although this was close to 7 hours, really never felt the need to drink much, which led to the fact that I never had to leave the booth once. Tim McCarver, my partner, I think left once during the 7th inning stretch, but he hung in there for the last 13 innings as well.
7th inning stretch, as though he knew what lay ahead of him almost.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can never be too careful. But, when you're looking at this, and again, I didn't get to see the game. It wasn't beamed to the Cleveland market here. But I've heard some dissections of a little bit of what was involved with it here. What did you make of the strategy and the fact that this clearly was a game that the Mets needed more, even though it's only April, needed more than the Cardinals needed? How much of that did you think cascaded down into the managerial decisions that were made?
I agree with you. I think that certainly did play a part. The Mets were 3-7 going into the game, and they've actually won 2 in a row now since that St. Louis series. They won that game, lost Sunday, and won their last 2. The Cardinals were 7-3 at the time. They're in a better spot, obviously, in their division than the Mets, and it's still early. It's only April, but I think Tony La Russa probably played it safe as far as certain players and the potential for injuries and not having to go to position players pitching earlier than he did. So I think that was definitely a factor. I was surprised when La Russa did not pinch hit for his pitchers in the 12th and 14th innings with the bases loaded. He had one position player left on his bench, Brian Anderson, who's a backup catcher, and his thinking was that if he pinch hit in either spot for the pitcher, then he would run out of pitchers earlier. But my contention, and I think a lot of others agreed, was that you also have a better chance to win the game and end the game. So that was a little bit strange, as far as the strategy goes. But the most bizarre thing to me was the fact that the game was scoreless through 18 innings. I think we've seen other long games in recent years, that have gone 14 or 15 or 16 innings, but there were runs scored. In this one, there were no runs scored over the first 18 innings. There were 17 different pitchers in the game who did not allow a run. I think that was also one of the most incredible, tidbits to come out of the game. The fact that 19 pitchers pitched, really 17 pitchers and 2 position players, and 17 of the 19 did not allow a run.
You would be an interesting guy to ask about this because you call a great number of games, of course, that are not on national TV, and then you call some that are. So you see both sides of the coin more than a lot of broadcasters do. It always just strikes me as kind of odd as a viewer when a game like that happens, when it just happens to be on national TV. I go back to 2001, that game that my Indians were involved in, that Sunday night game, I think, where they came back and won like 15-14. It was one of the the biggest comeback in 100 years. It just always strikes me whenever that happens, like, what are the odds that something like this happens in a nationally televised game? As somebody who calls so many games through the course of a winter, just that are not on national TV and maybe maybe nothing noteworthy happens in them or whatever. Does it always strike you as something weird when you happen to be on national TV and then the whole country's talking about it the next day?
It does, especially in baseball where the teams play 162 games and, you have the 3 regional Saturday games on Fox. You have an ESPN game Sunday night. You have a couple of scattered ESPN games during the week. But you're right. I think back to, my childhood. I remember watching a Jack Morris no-hitter on national TV, and I remember a great, Pedro Martinez, Mike Messina duel on a Sunday night. The spotlight certainly is bigger when the games are on national TV. And with this one, I think if it were, a game in Seattle or, Phoenix on a Tuesday night that won 20 innings, you'd read one paragraph about it in the paper, but, the next day. But because it was, the national game that went to 61% of the country, it did seem to take on a life of its own.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people around the country, either got home from dinner or, were home waiting to watch the primetime programming, Cops, America's Most Wanted, the 10 o'clock news, and, those were all preempted by the game.
Yeah, it's an odd thing, because when you look at your schedule through the course of a year, you were calling obviously a lot of high-profile hockey games during the Olympics. There, you could have been forgiven for thinking, okay, the next time I'm participating in something that becomes a nationally famous game will be when I start up with the NFL again in September, and then boom, in April it just hits you, and you're a part of an event like that.
That's right. You wouldn't think a Mets-Cardinals game on April 17th. I had worked the Olympics and I was involved in a hockey game the week before, the Rangers and the Flyers, where the winner was going to advance to the playoffs and the loser's season was over. And this was my first baseball game of the year. And you're absolutely right. It's probably the equivalent of walking into a no-hitter, which I've never had the fortune to do. One of those games where, again, it's an April 17th afternoon game, game 11 of 162 for both teams, and it turns into a game that, I'll remember for the rest of my professional life.
Yeah, it's the strange hands of fate, how these things happen, just, random occurrences. It's unbelievable. That game you referenced the previous week, the Rangers-Flyers game, and I was commiserating with my good friend Russ Cohen, who was, with his Ranger Greats book out there right now, is really beating the drum for all things New York Rangers, and he was bemoaning what happened. And I said to him, taking a kind of cold-eyed view of the situation, I said, look, they lost the revenue from 2 home playoff games, but, if you're looking at drawing the Caps in the first round, what else have you got to look forward to? Now, then again, I say that, and Montreal comes out like a house of fire the first game, but, that could have been a pretty ugly first round potentially had they drawn the Caps, correct?
Well, that was the point of view of some folks for sure. It's not the first time I've heard that. But then, you do see the Caps struggling in their first 2 home games, and the Rangers did beat them, actually, in games 1 and 2 last year. They wound up winning the series in 7, so you never know. But, I think it would have been obviously good for the organization to make the playoffs. It would have given the fans a couple of extra games and, continued, to keep hockey in the spotlight for at least another 2 weeks here in New York. So, certainly a shame that they did miss the playoffs. But, moving forward, the Rangers obviously hope to put a couple of more pieces in place this summer. And it was certainly a bizarre ending as well to the Rangers season, to have the last game of the season go to a shootout to determine whether or not they were going to make the playoffs. That's something that never happened before either.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, we talk about history. Yeah, you were a part of history in that instance too. I remember hearing about that at the time. Now again, the shootout has only been in effect these last couple of years, so we're not talking about going back to 1850. Right. But still, you were a part of the first game where that was a case with the 2 teams involved. That's really bizarre.
No, that's right. I did the radio broadcast for that for MSG Radio, and shootout's only been in place for 5 years, and some people feel that it shouldn't be in the game. It's exciting for the fans during the regular season, and the teams can't play forever in the regular season when it comes to overtime. Otherwise they'd be exhausted when they have back-to-back games and 3 and 4 nights. But I think fortunately for all involved, they do not have the shootout in the playoffs. They continue to play overtime until a team wins. But it was certainly exciting to be a part of that game, and very anticlimactic for Ranger fans once the game ended.
Yeah, it really was the way that came down. And, speaking of hockey again, with you having called those great games during the Olympics, the last time you were on, we talked about this in looking ahead to Vancouver, and I said at the time, it's one of my absolute favorite things on the sports calendar when that comes up, not just the nationalism, but the elite on elite all-star tournament aspect of it. I taped all the games, as I customarily do, so I got to enjoy listening to your calls as well as the calls of the other teams there. Was very glad that along the way, they had you on the Canada-Slovakia game as well, one of the two semifinals. So that was good to get to hear you on that. And just talk about your general thoughts on the tournament, what it was like. I mean, you talked before about this Mets-Cardinals game, something that's going to stick with you for a lifetime. I got to think being in Vancouver for those 17 days is right there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great. I got to call 20 games in 15 days, and half men and half women. And you mentioned the Canada-Slovakia game, and that was certainly a highlight. But you're right. It was like 7 or 8 all-star teams. There were 12 teams in the men's competition, and 7 of them are made up primarily of NHL players, and the other 5 have scattered NHL players throughout. And it was hockey played at such a high level. It's intense. Everyone's there for 2 weeks, and the players come in from all over the place, but really come together and play for their countries. And just fortunate personally to be a part of that. But it's really, amongst the highest level of hockey that we'll ever see.
And that's what makes it amazing. Yeah, just all the unique elements of it that just make it so great. And what I'm wondering is, I wonder about your perspective there, being inside the bubble of Vancouver and being encased in this for the 17 days during it. I wonder if at any point you had the same sense of this that I did, because after the USA-Canada game, the first one, everybody's got this air of euphoria down here in the States. It's all good. Maybe this is going to be it. And then when Canada came out in the quarterfinals the way they did, I started kind of vibing back to 0-2 because, we forget about how, Sweden really kind of ate their lunch in that first game there. And it was this whole cycle of recriminations and, Canada's going to blow it. I had a sense even before the semifinals, like, maybe they had their wake-up call and here we go again. Did you start to feel that at any point in time before Canada really picked up steam?
Well, I was at that first USA-Canada game. I wasn't working it, but I attended it. And although it was great, obviously, for the U.S. that they won, and so many non-hockey fans got excited about it in the United States based on that game, it was a very important game as far as seeding goes, but Canada knew that it was not a single elimination. They were obviously still alive, to finish in the top 8. Now, by losing that game, they did have to play an extra game. And I said at the time that if Canada does go on to win the gold medal, they would deserve it, having to go through the path that they did. They had to play that extra game when the U.S. had the day off, I think on the Wednesday, and then or on a Tuesday, and then the quarterfinal games were on Wednesday, I think. I might have my days mixed up. So they squeaked by in the the play-in game, the extra game, and then they absolutely kill Russia in the quarterfinal game, which nobody expected. And then they had another potential heartbreaking situation against Slovakia, the game you mentioned, where Canada was up 3-0, and Slovakia scores 2 in the third and nearly ties the game, and then they go on to beat the U.S. in the gold medal game. But it was certainly a wake-up call against Slovakia. But prior to that, the Russia game, it seemed like everything went right for Canada and nothing went right for Russia. They just came out and steamrolled them right from the start. But they deserved it. After losing that game, they had a hard path. Like I said, they had to play the extra game, and they had a tough draw where the U.S.'s road to the final was not nearly as tough as Slovakia's was.
That's true.
As Canada's was, I should say.
Oh, definitely. And speaking of Slovakia, I'm saying on the one hand, I started to have that feeling that I think Canada. It was Canada-Germany was the game before Russia, right?
That's right.
Was that okay, yeah. It was as far back as that game that I started having a feeling that maybe this was like 0-2 for Canada and they were going to rebound. Having said that, I didn't take anything for granted going into that Canada-Slovakia game because I felt all along like people were really kind of sleeping on the Slovaks. Granted, a lot of the guys on that team had seen their best days already in the NHL, but I kind of felt like a lot of people were selling them short. What was your feeling going into that game? I'll bet you didn't have the sense that game was a foregone conclusion when they lined up.
Well, the thing was, Canada, after they beat Germany, they were staring at the potential of playing Russia, Sweden, and then the U.S. or Finland, all in a 4-day stretch.
Uh-huh.
And, Slovakia winds up upsetting Sweden in a game that I also worked, which is a big surprise. A lot of folks thought Sweden would get back to the gold medal game like '06. So Slovakia upset Sweden, and I actually worked all 7 Slovakia games. I think I did 10 men's games, and 7 of them involved Slovakia. And they were such a fun team to watch. They had that shootout win over Russia. They lost to the Czech Republic, but they played fun games. You mentioned some of the guys had seen their better days, like a Pavel Dimitra, but he had a great tournament. Marian Gaborik was good until he got hurt. They had a lot of older guys in that team. It was their farewell, their goodbye tour. And I was kind of rooting for them in that quarterfinal game against Sweden. And then they really put on a terrific effort against Canada, fell just short in the third period. And then I think they deserved the bronze medal. Finland came back to win that game in the third period. Olli Jokinen scored 2 goals. But I thought overall, obviously the medals are based on one game once you get there. Once you get to the bronze medal game, the winner of that game gets it. But I felt, over the course of the whole tournament, Slovakia was a better team than Finland. Finland suffered a couple of embarrassing losses, but wound up getting the bronze medal out of it. But I think Slovakia were the sentimental favorites in that game, and they fell just short. They've never won an Olympic medal in hockey and came within a couple of minutes of picking up their bronze.
I certainly agree with you. I certainly think Slovakia played better over the course of the tournament. It's really interesting because we keep hearing about this, and it's undeniably true, that the NHL, they've got a youth movement going on right now that maybe is unlike any of the other Big Four sports out there as far as the guys in their early to mid-20s that are coming in and playing at such a high level, and yet this tournament, I'm not going to say it was the story of the tournament necessarily, but it was certainly a bigger sidebar than I think anybody thought it would be. When you look at the Slovaks and when you look at on Team USA, it's funny, we did a fantasy draft on the show here before the tournament. I got accused for, in the last round, making a homer pick because I'm a Red Wings fan. Took Brian Rafalski with my last pick, but nobody was laughing at me after that was done. I mean,
yeah, he certainly put a scare into Canada in that first game.
Oh, my God. I mean, that was one of the big sidebars of this thing, wasn't it, Kenny? Some of these old guys really came to play.
No, they did. Chris Drury, who I watch every night with the Rangers, really stepped up his game in the Olympics. I think it was a combination of the veterans and the young players. You look at some of the older guys in both Canada and the U.S. and really a number of the countries, but a lot of the youngsters contributed as well. Zach Parise scoring the tying goal in the gold medal game, and Ryan Miller's kind of in the middle, 27, 28 years old. But I think, in building teams, I think the GMs of many of the Olympic teams went for that combination of veterans and youth.
Yeah, and that was, chemistry is always a very interesting thing here. And I kind of made the joke at the time also about Canada, the way that they had it structured there. Why was the Shark line playing so well? Because the Canadian coaches hypnotized them into thinking that it was February NHL games. Because you don't see those guys playing that well in the spring generally.
No, that's right. No, you don't.
It's kind of an odd little thing there, but it's as far as the other winter sport that you cover on such a regular basis in New York with the Knicks here, I'm just curious. Everybody's been talking about for years now, July 1st, 2010. I don't have to tell you, in the flagship city for the Sports Talk Network here, Cleveland, Ohio, that's a sensitive date for us. I'm sensing a little growing sense of realism coming out of New York these days. It used to be almost kind of taken for granted, it seems to me, from what I can see from the outside among the fan base, that LeBron was necessarily going to go there. I've been saying for a long time I thought the 3-year extension to try to suck a little more juice out of the rind here before maybe taking a look at other things made sense. Are you getting the sense that the fan base there is kind of coming around to it, or is there still a lot of LeBron or bust type hype there?
Well, I've been around the Knicks for about a quarter of the season this year. I filled in on about 20 of their games, so I've certainly been around more than I have in past years. I think there is certainly a portion of the fan base that thinks LeBron is going to be here. I think all of the fans hope he is here, but I think there are certainly realists. One of the things Donnie Walsh, the president and general manager, has talked about, and he obviously can't talk about other players and other teams by name, but it seems like the message has gotten out through the media that not only is there a plan A in place, but a plan B, C, and D. And some of the other names we've heard are Joe Johnson and Chris Bosh, Mari Stoudemire. The Knicks have 2 spots open, 2 max contract spots. So I think the general feeling is if they don't get a LeBron or a Dwayne Wade, that they'll try and get, two of the other guys. I think, plan A would obviously be LeBron plus one of the other guys, such as a Bosch. But, they do have plan A, B, C, D, and E in place, I'm sure. And, the one thing I look at from a Knicks standpoint is the fact that LeBron has not re-signed and has indicated that he does want to explore, come July 1st. We've seen some of these other guys, Kobe Bryant, Manu Ginobili, now Marcus Camby re-signed. So I think, Knicks fans can hold out hope until July 1st. Now, I don't necessarily want to put a percentage on it as far as, my feelings, because I don't think anybody knows but LeBron. But the Knicks certainly will be counting the days until July 1st. And from a fan standpoint, the number one choice would obviously be LeBron, but if not, hopefully a package of two of those other key guys.
And it's interesting, too, that we've looked at this in recent years in the league, and it's kind of been a cautionary tale. You'll look at Philadelphia with Elton Brand. You'll look at Detroit last year with the way that they spent the money with Villanueva and Gordon. There's this whole notion that we got to spend the money just to spend the money. I happen to love Joe Johnson as a player. I don't think he's necessarily the guy that takes you to that next level there. A Bosch certainly could be Wade, LeBron. I mean, the guy's there. If you're looking at Joe Johnson and then maybe somebody else being the max contract guys, I wonder. I mean, it's the pressure cooker in New York. Donnie Walsh has got to look like he's getting something this summer. But then again, you want to make sure. I think that's been the lesson that's drummed into the league the last couple of years. You got to make sure you're spending max money on the right guys. That could be a delicate balance for them if they get shut out on a couple of the top guys they're looking at.
No, you're right. And Donnie Walsh has also indicated, it's been written in the media that they don't necessarily have to go for two guys this year. A Carmelo Anthony's available after next season. So Donnie Walsh has said we're not necessarily going to spend all the money this year. There's a chance, there are certain scenarios that, that we could certainly hold on to one of those max spots for next season.
That would definitely be wise, for him to be pragmatic and to kind of take it as it goes. Most definitely, that's the best thing he could do for the Knicks, it seems to me. In terms of what might be your highest profile gig as far as the national spotlight, because it has sort of taken root as our de facto national pastime here over the last 20-25 years with the NFL. Of course, the draft being in the spotlight tomorrow night and everything going on with that. You, of course, are looking ahead to a fall schedule here. The schedule was just released yesterday. I'm curious, from your point of view, you're sitting there, you're in the spot of, generally calling from week to week what Fox perceives to be the number 2 game. Number 1 for, I guess, the games in October when Buck's doing the baseball here. But basically, you generally know on a given basis that you're getting one of the top 2 games. Is it a human kind of instinct on your part to look at the schedule and start thinking, I could be here or here this week. This would be kind of interesting. How do you react when the schedule comes out?
It's like, it's like a kid in a candy store, I think. Not only for me, but my entire crew. The guys behind the scenes, our producer, director, the entire production team. We must have sent 15 emails back and forth yesterday trying to prognosticate, where we're going to be on a given day. So, it's a lot of fun, to look ahead and try and figure out where we're going to be. We'll usually get our first 4 or 5 assignments around mid-July, and then after that, they're usually assigned about 3 weeks in advance because it could change, depending on how certain teams are doing. But we joke that the day the NFL schedule comes out is like a national holiday because it's so much fun to anticipate where we're going to go 4 months from now and play that same game, okay, this one's going to be the A game, this should be the B game, we might be at this one, who knows? So it's a fun day.
Well, I had no idea when I asked the question. I thought there might be a little curiosity on your part, but there's all these emails and speculation ping-ponging already, huh?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, well, that is, I'm sure that obviously you can pin it down, to a handful of games at the very least every week as you're looking at it here. I'm curious also, too, from a human perspective, you got to be thinking about what happens the autumn after this one here. There's been so much speculation about what's going to happen now that the collective bargaining agreement has been reopened, and it does look like there's a collision course, coming our way next year. Could be the worst thing to happen to the league in a quarter century since the last time that this happened. How much do you, as a broadcaster, kind of get caught up in this? Like, geez, maybe I better savor these games this fall because I don't know where any of us are going to be the fall after this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly hoping for the best, and we heard from the commissioner last year at our Fox seminar, and, he outlined some of the parameters moving forward, as far as the collective bargaining agreement between the owners and the Players Association. But, unless you're in that room, that negotiating room, you really have no idea, how close or how far apart they are. And, on a personal standpoint, I've lived through 3 hockey lockouts now, one pretty short one. One was a half season in 95 or 94, 95, and then, obviously the entire season was knocked out in 04, 05, and that wasn't any fun. So, I'll be keeping my fingers crossed, as will most of America, that they can get things worked out and we won't lose any games next year.
I think that's what we're all hoping for. Yeah, I mean, you're obviously hoping to be there and do what you do very well and call these games. We're hoping to be able to hear you calling them and watch the guys on the field. And, everybody just has to hope that cooler heads prevail. I have to ask you also, too, we had on a little earlier in the show a friend of ours who covers TV and technology in New York, Simon Applebaum. We spent a fair amount of time talking about this thing with Conan going to TBS, and he was talking about how that's going to be billboarded a lot, like during the NBA playoffs and stuff. And I'm thinking to myself in my head, this is like an odd coincidence kind of a thing, because Conan was supposed to be going where you're at. He's supposed to be going to Fox. He ends up going over to Turner here. Is there any smack talking going on in the family here? Did you get a call from your dad saying, hey, we got Conan?
No, I haven't heard from him on that subject. We did talk last night. He was in Boston for a Celtics playoff game, but no, that subject has not yet come up as far as the press talk regarding Conan.
Yeah, it's we love hearing him on the playoff games as well, and I hope to hear him calling a lot of great LeBron games this spring en route to a championship. I hope selfishly, but always love catching your work too, Kenny. I mean, clearly you are, if not in the first family of American sports broadcasting, one of the very few. Love catching you on all these different platforms here. Is there anything that we missed here tonight that we should be promoting about that work that you're doing?
Well, let's see. My daughters both start softball this week, so we didn't touch on those games.
Okay.
I'll have to give you the scouting report next time we chat.
Very good, very good. They have a nice collegiate career ahead of them, or is it too early to tell?
Well, a little too early to tell. 1st and 5th grade right now, so we'll wait on that a little bit. But no, I think we pretty much captured it all, and we hit hockey, we hit a little basketball, baseball, football. I think we're good.
Kenny, we love it. Variety is the spice of life on this show. Nothing is off topic, and you exemplify that. We can get you on and talk to you about any number of different things. Always a real true pleasure. Honor to have you on. We love to do it again sometime.
Well, I really enjoy it every time we've done it, so give me a call anytime.